Good morning. My name is G. Park, and I'm the facilitator for the New Orleans Task Force. I'm just going to go down and introduce everyone at the table, starting from the far end. It's Rosanna Cruz, and she is the Deputy Director of VOTE, which is a community organization. It's called Voices of the Ex-Offender. And sitting next to Rosanna is Norris Henderson, and Norris is the Executive Director of VOTE, and they're both our community representative for the task force. Sitting next to Norris is Colin Reingold. He is a staff attorney with the Public Defender's Office. Sitting next to Colin is Michael Bradley. He's the Deputy Chief Public Defender of the Public Defender's Office. And next to Michael is Andre Maddox, and she's the Director of Social Services at the DA's office, in the District Attorney's Office. And so, a brief recap of what we've been doing for the past year. We left the conference, so almost everyone who's here today was also, or their office was also represented when we were here last October. The one person who's missing from our task force this morning is our judge, Judge Lori White. She actually intended to be here, but some other things came up and she couldn't make it, but she was here last year and she intended to be here this morning as well. So when we left October of last year, we were really excited about the task ahead of us, and we probably met every 2 weeks after we returned to New Orleans. We probably had like 5 meetings of, the latter part of last year, trying to figure out what it is that we wanted to focus on. And much like other groups, you guys, we also kind of spent our wheels a little bit. We talked about bond setting and pretrial release, because at the same time as we were having conversations, there was a greater community conversation about our jail population, jail size, and all of that. New Orleans is in the cusp of building a new jail facility. And so there's been a lot of community discussions about how big the jail should be. So we were trying to get ourselves inserted into that conversation, but then we soon learned that the Vera Institute of Justice received a much bigger grant than what we had, a $500,000 grant to look at their pretrial services and to try to implement a pretrial service program in New Orleans. And so we decided, instead of working on the outer fringes of their, bigger grant, we would forego that idea and focus on another area. So we turned to the police, the obvious culprits in this. And so we were looking at policing practices, and the police officer who were actually part of the task force, Marlon DeFillo, he was amazing, and he was really open about just wanting scrutiny in what they're doing. And so we talked a lot about that, about Terry stops and consent searches and the racial disparity in those searches. And as we were having a conversation, we then learned that NOPD, the New Orleans Police Department, is about to enter into a consent decree with the Justice Department. And so, that being the case, again, we were going to be on the outer fringes, outer fringes of trying to work a reform when the DOJ is coming in to clean up or, do their thing with NOPD. And so, at around this time, I think Cynthia came down. I think this was like in mid-December. And she said, what are we doing? And we explained to her how we've been spinning our wheels. We had these great ideas, great reform agendas, but realizing that there were other organizations, other groups coming in and working on those issues as well. And we started talking about diversion at that meeting. And part of the reason why we began to focus on diversion was that the judge, who's not here today, she had a diversion status day, the day that we happened to meet with Cynthia, and she was talking about how, as a judge in the criminal district court, that she didn't have enough information about diversion, about what the program was like, who was getting into diversion, and there was just lack of knowledge. And we realized the police didn't have any real knowledge about what was happening in the diversion program, and neither the public defenders. And so all of the criminal justice stakeholders who are in the system, who are trying to work with each other, didn't have information about a crucial program. And the district attorney, it's a new district attorney. He came into the office 2 years ago, and prior to becoming a district attorney of New Orleans, he was a criminal district court judge and an appellate judge, and then he got voted into as a district attorney. And when he was a criminal district court judge, he actually was one of the first judges to bring in drug court to New Orleans. He got a big federal grant, and he brought in drug court. And obviously, drug court was a post-conviction program, but he understood what it meant to provide services and treatment, obviously, to offenders and to people in need of treatment. And so when he came into the office, one of the first things he did was to revamp the diversion program. Now, his predecessor had a diversion program that many people complained about, and many people felt that it was a money-making operation. And there was a huge pay rate that you had to pay in order to get into the program. And so there was a lot of dissatisfaction with that previous program. And so when Leon Canizero, who's our current DA, when he got voted into the office, one of the first things that he did, and one of the first promises he made to the community, was that he was going to revamp the diversion program. And he did do that, and he was in the process of doing that, except the information about what he was doing wasn't being shared with the rest of the other stakeholders in the system. And so Cynthia and I went over and spoke with the first assistant and with also Andre that December and kind of explained what we were hoping to do. You know, one, provide more information to other stakeholders about what it is that you guys are doing. Two, help us figure out whether or not there are anything that we can help you with, you know, we can enhance the program with. And so that's where the dialogue started. And the first assistant and Andre were incredibly gracious, because no one, when we were initially meeting, no one at this table was willing to be like, yes, come scrutinize our organization, tell us what we are doing wrong. The judges weren't willing to do that. Public defenders obviously were a little reticent. And so it was really a great opportunity for us to go talk to the district attorney and his first assistant, and for him to say, we are always interested in doing things better. We're always interested in making our programming better to serve more people. So with that start, what we did in February, we had an interim deliverable. Us too got the language, the vocabulary started. And so what we did was we had a mini luncheon where we brought panels in from other jurisdictions who talked about their diversion program and how diversion has many different faces. There isn't one face to diversion, right? Depending on your jurisdiction, depending on your population, depending on what it is that you want to do, there are many different ways you can actually carry out a diversionary program. And so we brought in some speakers with the help of, and he's also now serving as a consultant, and he will be with us, I think maybe tomorrow, I think today, maybe tomorrow. But he works with the pretrial services here in Washington, D.C. His name is Spurgeon Kennedy. He's our consultant. He's been working closely with us the last year. But he helped us, and Cynthia helped us put together a luncheon back in February where we brought in all the different speakers and invited our community leaders. And we're talking about city council people, we're talking about local organizations, judges, everyone, so that we can all be on the same level or same ground about what diversion is and what diversion can be, what diversion is currently, and to open the dialogue. And that was our initial foray into looking at diversion. And so since February, we've been meeting on a regular basis. And the racial disparity in New Orleans it's a city that is predominantly African American. About 65, according to the most recent census, about 65% of the city is African Americans, and about 35%, it's not wide, but there's about, I think, a growing Latino population that's almost 5%, and a small Asian population, which I believe is about 2%, and then the rest is white. And so African Americans are overrepresented in our criminal justice system, and we expected African Americans to be overrepresented in the diversion program as well, and that actually is the truth. And so we're not talking about a huge racial disparity in the sense that African Americans are not accepted in the diversion program, or African Americans, there's not enough whites are being accepted into the diversion program, but we accept that there is the minority population is overrepresented in the criminal justice system. So if there's anything we can do to prevent or to help less African Americans go through the traditional criminal justice system, criminal justice proceeding, then we're doing something positive for the city. And so I think I will end with that if anyone has any questions. But then obviously tomorrow we'll spend some time explaining what our reform is and what we hope to do in the upcoming year.
Any of the panelists have any comments to add to what you said? One of the things that we encountered in New Orleans, and different than the other projects, is the fact racial disparity. We're dealing with a program that exists, that's functioning. In fact, many of us would say Andre's doing too good of a job with respect to some of the population because she has a master's in social work. She employs, what, 3 or 4 other social workers?
Actually, I have a master's in counseling. I'm a licensed professional counselor and a marriage and family therapist. But I have master's level counselors and social workers in all my divisions. In diversion, I have 7 master's level counselors and social workers, 3 of whom are licensed with my adult population and 2 for my juvenile population.
And so not many diversion programs in the country have that kind of pedigree, right? They're actually capable of providing therapy, drug treatment, ongoing individual counseling, group therapy, and they provide those services for a segment of their criminal justice population. As a result, they can't serve hundreds and hundreds of people because they can't provide the services. So one of the things we've been talking about is there a way to, in addition to providing that level of services for one segment of the population, to provide some lesser level of services for folks who aren't as needy and expand the number of people who can be diverted. But the program itself, one of the things we've been trying to do is advertise it a little bit more because I think as a result of the fact that it's operating in the DA's office and it's not really advertised, not even on the website, it has a general description of it. I think the judges and the prosecutors and other folks in criminal justice is going to become suspicious of it. And it kind of got this, like, it's arbitrary and it's racist and all of these things were happening, none of which turned out to be true. But because no one knew what was going on, the judges would say, I don't know why this guy's in diversion and how long it's going to be, and it's been going on forever, and I don't know what they're doing. And so hopefully one of the things we can do is at least educate the criminal justice system about what's actually going on, while simultaneously trying to improve it and expand diversion in a way that is therapeutic and it works for your office.
And we actually do have about 1,000 people at any given time on our adult diversion program. So it's fairly extensive considering the drug courts only have that population right now. In New Orleans, the drug court only has about 500 people in it, so I've doubled that. But yeah, absolutely. One of the reasons that my guys have taken on treatment as much as they have is because treatment services in Orleans Parish has been cut. Our Human Services District just laid off 11 of their substance abuse counselors in the last several months. They had done a traditional once-a-week substance abuse group for as long as 20 years that I've been around, and then that was cut out. So now all they do is intensive outpatient services as well as link people to residential. So once we lost that, we were doing psycho-ed because some of the people coming through the program didn't need traditional treatment. They needed more of a psycho-ed component. And that was primarily when we were doing marijuana cases, which we don't do anymore. They're handled in a different court. So I'm only dealing with felonies now. So we started having to implement those traditional type substance abuse groups as well. So my guys have picked up a lot of the treatment component simply because it's not available in our community right now.
Question. How do you fund this program? Obviously, you got a lot of credentials.
That's really interesting because most of my funding comes from the city, except I just found out that we're essentially taking a $400,000 cut. So if that money is not refunded to us through the city council, the mayor's budget essentially cuts us $400,000. My program will probably take a significant cut. And that may mean that we have less people to provide these services to.
But at the moment, it's city, which is
Primarily city funded, that's correct. Yes, through our parish.
Other questions? Thank you, Nora.
Okay, thank you.